9 bullets, 1 face, 1 tongue that would never sound the same again. That is not a rap lyric. That is the actual medical chart of a 24-year-old kid from South Jamaica, Queens, who most record labels had already written off as a corpse in a hospital gown. And here's the part nobody tells you the right way. That kid was already legally dead in the music industry before the shooter ever pulled up. The bullets were the second execution. And the story of how Curtis Jackson crawled off that hospital bed, sold mixtapes out of a car trunk in Canada, and forced Eminem and Dr. Dre to fight each other over who got assigned 50 Cent is not a rags to riches story. It is the coldest revenge plan ever executed in American music. And the receipts, ladies and gentlemen, have been sitting in plain sight for 25 years. Nobody bothered to read the receipts in order. Until now, because 50 Cent did not just survive. 50 Cent won. And there's a difference nobody wants to talk about, because that difference is exactly where the whole legend starts to make sense. Let me set the scene properly, because everybody skips the beginning, and the beginning is the whole point. July 6, 1975. Queens, New York. A 15-year-old girl named Sabrina Jackson gives birth to a baby boy Sabrina names Curtis James Jackson III. 15. Read that again. Sabrina is a child holding a child. And Sabrina, according to 50 Cent, is already deep in the streets by the time Curtis Jackson takes the first breath. Sabrina is selling drugs. Not on the side. As a career. Because a 15-year-old girl in South Jamaica, Queens in 1975 with a newborn does not have a lot of legal resume options. And here's the sentence 50 Cent has said out loud that most fans blow right past. Curtis Jackson never met the father. Not once. Not a phone call. Not a photograph. Not a name in a birthday card. Not a nickname whispered by a cousin at a barbecue. Just a hole in the family tree where a father was supposed to stand. So already, before Curtis Jackson can walk, the ledger of the life Curtis Jackson did not choose reads like this. No father. A teenage mother in the game. And a neighborhood built on the kind of survival math where being soft is a terminal illness. Sabrina, by all accounts, was magnetic. 50 Cent describes Sabrina the way people describe a comet. When Sabrina walked into a room, the room bent toward Sabrina. The smile lit the block. The personality was the party. But magnetism does not stop bullets, and magnetism does not balance a drug ledger. When Curtis Jackson is 8 years old, Sabrina's count does not add up. Somebody wanted paid. Sabrina could not pay in cash. So Sabrina paid with Sabrina's own life. That is the polite version. The real version is that somebody in that neighborhood decided a young woman with a little boy at home was an acceptable line item on a revenue sheet. And that decision, made in a room Curtis Jackson will never sit in, is the invisible foundation the entire 50 Cent empire is later built on. Curtis Jackson does not understand yet. Curtis Jackson, at 8, still thinks Sabrina is coming back. The grandfather has to sit Curtis Jackson down and say the words that break a childhood in half. Sabrina is not coming back. Sabrina is never coming back. And a version of Curtis Jackson died in that living room too. That is the first death in this story. There will be more. Curtis Jackson moves in with the grandparents full time. Old school people. Church people. The kind of grandparents who believe a paycheck belongs on the kitchen table and a boy belongs in an after-school program. And to their faces, that is exactly the life Curtis Jackson lives. Behind their backs, at 12 years old, Curtis Jackson's on the corner, hustling. 12. 12 is 5th grade math. 12 is braces. 12 is a bike with the peg still on it. But for Curtis Jackson, 12 is a scale, a stash spot, and a nervous system permanently wired for exit routes. And the grandparents, God bless the grandparents, do not know. The grandparents think Curtis Jackson is enrolled. Curtis Jackson is enrolled, all right, just in a different institution. The streets. And the streets, 50 Cent will later say, do not raise a child. The streets damage a child. No father. A murdered mother. Old grandparents on a fixed income. A neighborhood that eats children like snacks. That is the fuel tank Curtis Jackson is running on when everybody else Curtis Jackson's age is worried about the school dance and a science project. By high school, the mask cracks. Curtis Jackson is walking into Andrew Jackson High School carrying a gun and drug money in the same book bag. The metal detectors do the rest. First arrest, juvenile, a slap on the wrist. A second arrest, a real one, selling crack to an undercover officer. Then a search of the house. More crack, heroin, a pistol. This is not a kid dabbling. This is a kid becoming a case number. 7 months in a boot camp shock incarceration program. Curtis Jackson walks out with a GED, a new understanding of exactly how quickly life can be repossessed, and a new name. 50 Cent named after Kelvin Martin, a legendary Brooklyn stick-up kid from the 80s. Kelvin Martin was the neighborhood folktale, the Omar from The Wire before The Wire even existed. If Kelvin Martin came through the door, whoever was inside was already losing. And Curtis Jackson did not pick the name to be cute. Curtis Jackson picked the name to signal a thesis. Every day, no matter what, be worth every cent. Be worth surviving. Be worth taking seriously. Rebrand the trauma. Turn the tombstone into a business card. That is not marketing. That is survival contracts signed to the self, in blood, before the paperwork even exists. Here is where the reverse timeline gets interesting, because most people think the rap career starts to get rich or die trying. It does not. The rap career starts in a friend's basement in 1996 on stolen instrumentals, in front of a mentor most casual fans forget existed. Jam Master Jay of Run DMC. Jay hears something in Curtis Jackson, not just the voice, the structure, the willingness to be trained. And Jay does something almost no mentor in hip-hop was doing at that moment. Jay makes Curtis Jackson write choruses, over and over, 3 times, 4 times, before the verse ever gets touched. Jay teaches Curtis Jackson how to count bars, how to write a hook that a stranger can sing after one listen, how to bend a melody into a threat. This is a technical apprenticeship nobody credits enough. Jam Master Jay basically hands 50 Cent the instruction manual for pop hip-hop before pop hip-hop even knew it needed one. Then Jam Master Jay is murdered years later in Jam Master Jay's own studio. Another mentor gone. Another debt 50 Cent will never be able to repay in person, only in records. By 1999, Curtis Jackson has outgrown the small deal. Columbia Records signs 50 Cent track masters, put 50 Cent in the studio, and Curtis Jackson does something psychotic. 36 songs in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Most rappers today take 2 weeks to pick an album cover. Curtis Jackson is bleeding songs. 18 of those tracks land on the debut album, Power of the Dollar. And then Curtis Jackson records a song that changed Curtis Jackson's life twice, in opposite directions. How to Rob, a track written on a car ride to the studio. A song that names every big rap star at the time and describes, comedically, how 50 Cent would rob each of them. Jay, Z, DMX, the Wu-Tang Clan, Nas, Master P. It is a comedy record and a career suicide note stapled together. The industry lights up. Jay-Z fires back on a track. DMX barks. Nas invites 50 Cent on tour. Curtis Jackson has done the impossible. Curtis Jackson has made every A-list rapper in New York acknowledge a nobody from Queens with one song. And the machine starts to move. Columbia is preparing the debut. The single is heating up. This is the takeoff. This is the moment. And this is when the second death arrives. May 24th, 2000, South Jamaica, Queens, in front of the grandmother's old house. 50 Cent slides into a friend's car. Another car pulls up. A gunman gets out. 9mm handgun. 9 rounds. 50 Cent is in the hand, the arm, the hip, both legs, the chest, and the left cheek. The cheek shot is the one that rewrites everything. A fragment lodges in 50 Cent's tongue. Wisdom tooth gone. Voice permanently altered. That famous slur, that low, syrupy, almost sleepy delivery every rap fan on earth can identify inside 3 syllables. That is not a stage voice. That is scar tissue. That is a bullet that never came out. 13 days in the hospital. 6 weeks on a walker. 5 months to walk normally again. And then the coldest part of the story. Columbia Records drops 50 Cent. The industry blacklists 50 Cent. Nobody wants a signed artist who might get shot again in the parking lot of the release party. Every executive who had been calling stops calling. Flowers do not come. The shooter, Darryl Baum, a close associate of Mike Tyson, is killed 3 weeks later. That case is closed the street way. And Curtis Jackson, 25 years old, half deaf in one ear, a bullet in the tongue, no label, no radio, no phone ringing, sits in a house and has to decide whether the story ends there. Here is a sentence that separates 50 Cent from every other rapper who got shot and disappeared. 50 Cent decided the shooting was not the end of the story. 50 Cent decided the shooting was the marketing budget. Read that again. While the industry was pretending Curtis Jackson was already a ghost, 50 Cent moved to Canada, of all places, and started recording. Not a comeback album. Not one polished single. 30-plus mixtape songs. Taking other rappers' hottest beats and butchering the beats. Sending shots at the whole scene. and selling those tapes out of the trunk of a car. Mixtape DJs in every borough start spinning nothing, but 50 Cent guess whose back drops in 2002. Not on a major label, on the streets. And the tape lands in exactly the hands 50 Cent needed the tape to land in. Eminem. Eminem hears the tape, plays the tape for Dr. Dre, and both Eminem and Dr. Dre do something that never happens in hip-hop. Eminem and Dr. Dre fight over who gets to sign 50 Cent, not compete. Fight. Eminem eventually laughs about it in interviews and says, fine, 50-50 on 50. Cut it in half. We both signed the guy. A $1 million deal. Shady Aftermath Interscope. The three biggest brands in hip-hop stapled to a kid who, 24 months earlier, was a corpse on paper in a hospital gown in Queens. Get Rich or Die Tryin drops in early 2003. 12 million copies sold. In the Club sets a Billboard record for most listened-to song in radio history in a single week. Not a bad song on the album. Not one. Every track built like a car chase. Eminem produces half. Dr. Dre produces half. 50 Cent walks into Dre's studio and finishes an entire half an album in 7 days. 7 days. Dr. Dre later says on camera, it was one of the wildest sessions of Dr. Dre's career. Curtis Jackson kept saying, put up another one. Put up another one. The album is not just a hit. The album is a cultural detonation. The muscle, the vest, the tattoos, the scarred face, the slurred voice, the lyrics that sound like a police interview, and the crucial ingredient nobody could fake. Authenticity. Because when 50 Cent said many men wish death upon 50 Cent, the receipts were already in the tongue. Fans could feel the difference between a rapper who studied the streets and a rapper who wore the streets home from the hospital in a wheelchair. Then G-Unit, Lloyd Banks, Tony Yayo, Young Buck, The Game through a joint deal with Aftermath. G-Unit Records signs the Interscope. Lloyd Banks drops The Hunger for More and goes platinum. The Massacre drops in 2005 and sells over 1 million copies in 4 days. 6 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard 200. Candy Shop Disco Inferno, and How We Do all in the Billboard Top 5 at the same time. That was a first. A solo artist with 3 songs in the top 5 simultaneously. Then video games. 50 Cent Bulletproof. Then sneakers with Reebok, the G-Unit line. Moving units so fast Reebok had a reprint. Then Vitaminwater. Curtis Jackson takes an equity stake in Glasso, the parent company, when Glasso is still a small brand nobody in hip-hop is even looking at. Coca-Cola later buys Glasso. 50 Cent walks away with an estimated $100 million. Give or take from a drink. From a drink. A kid from South Jamaica, Queens, who could not read a stock ticker at 12 years old outsmarted an entire generation of MBAs by putting a purple bottle in a music video and calling it lifestyle. And this is where the unique angle gets uncomfortable, because everybody remembers the beefs, but nobody sees the beefs for what the beefs actually were. The beefs were not tantrums. The beefs were product launches. Ja Rule was not a rival. Ja Rule was a stage. Murder, Inc. was not an enemy. Murder, Inc. was a backdrop. 50 Cent looked at Ja Rule, the melodic hook king with Ashanti, J. Lo, Christina Milian, and Jennifer Lopez all singing on the tracks, and Curtis Jackson realized something the streets already knew. The streets did not fully trust that image. The image was too soft, too clean, too radio-friendly. So 50 Cent dropped Wanksta. And Wanksta did not just diss Ja Rule. Wanksta invented a category, printed Ja Rule's name on the category, and taped the category to Ja Rule's forehead. Ja Rule never recovered. The federal case around Murder, Inc. did the rest. And 50 Cent, 20 years later, is buying 200 front row seats to a Ja Rule concert just to leave the seats empty so the internet has something to laugh at. That is not a beef. That is a lifetime subscription to living rent-free in another man's head. Then Kanye, September 11th, 2007. Graduation versus Curtis. Same release date. 2 Rolling Stone covers. VMAs stare downs. Bookies taking bets. Kanye wins the sales week. And most fans read that as 50 Cent losing. Wrong. 50 Cent had already won, because the Kanye rivalry gave both artists the biggest launch of both artists' lives. Kanye becomes Kanye. 50 Cent becomes the artist who bet on the culture and lost gracefully on purpose. Do you notice a pattern here? Every so-called loss in the 50 Cent story is a rebrand in disguise. The shooting was a rebrand. The label drop was a rebrand. The Ja Rule war was a rebrand. The Kanye loss was a rebrand. Even the 2015 bankruptcy, which the tabloids feasted on, was a legal shield. 50 Cent kept posting pictures with stacks of cash while the case was open, just to troll the judge, because Curtis Jackson understood something most people never learn. Public perception is a weapon system. Aim public perception correctly. And the truth is whatever Curtis Jackson decides the truth is on Monday morning. And while everybody was arguing about the beefs, 50 Cent was quietly building a television empire. Power on Stars. James St. Patrick, a drug dealer trying to walk out a game and into a legitimate nightclub life. Sound familiar? It should. It is Curtis Jackson wearing a suit. 6 seasons. Multiple spin-offs. Book 2, Book 3, Book 4. Power became one of the most watched shows on cable television, period. Awards, ratings, cultural conversation. And 50 Cent is a producer, a writer, an actor, a marketer. G-Unit Film and Television Studios opens in Louisiana. Boxing promotions. Cognac, Champagne, Le Chemin du Roi, Branson Cognac. Every hustle 50 Cent touches. 50 Cent monetizes twice. Once for the product. Once for the story of the product. That is not luck. That is a 12-year-old on the corner of Guy Brewer Boulevard. Growing up, dressed different, running the same play at a national scale. Product, distribution, repeat customers. Nothing changed except the zip code and the size of the ledger. Then February 2022, the Super Bowl halftime show in Los Angeles. Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, Mary J. Blige, Kendrick Lamar. And out of a hole in the stage, hanging upside down like the video for In the Club, comes 50 Cent. The stadium loses the mind of the stadium because Dr. Dre said out loud on record that Dr. Dre would not have taken that stage without 50 Cent standing on it. Read that again. The biggest producer of the last 30 years said the Super Bowl was not happening without a certain kid from South Jamaica, Queens. That is not a rap cosign. That is a coronation. And meanwhile, In the Club, a pre-YouTube record, quietly crosses 1 billion views on the platform, becoming only the second pre-YouTube rap video in history to hit that number after Eminem's Without Me. Nostalgia? Sure. But nostalgia does not stack 1 billion views by accident. Nostalgia stacks 1 billion views because the record refused to age. Because 50 Cent, even from 2 decades ago, still sounds like tonight. Now, let's talk about the one thing nobody in this story ever gets over. Sabrina. Because everything you just heard, the empire, the tongue, the vest, the mixtapes, the Vitaminwater, the platinum plaques, the empty front row seats at Ja Rule's show, the Super Bowl stage, all of it is one man trying to build a monument tall enough to be seen from wherever Sabrina is. 50 Cent will tell you the childhood damaged Curtis Jackson. And that is true. But damage is also an engine. Damage is what makes a kid, at 12, tell the grandparents a polite lie about an after-school program while pockets are full of rocks. Damage is what makes a young man take 9 bullets on a Wednesday and be in a recording booth by autumn. Damage is what makes a bankrupted millionaire eat a sandwich made of $100 bills for a photograph just to prove a point. Damage, if the damage does not kill Curtis Jackson, becomes a personality. And the 50 Cent personality is the most weaponized version of damage American music has ever released into the wild. So next time somebody says 50 Cent is just a rapper, remember the actual receipts. Curtis Jackson lost Sabrina at 8. Lost the innocence at 12. Lost the freedom in high school. Lost the label at 24. Lost the tongue on May 24, 2000. Lost Jam Master Jay. Lost the Kanye sales week. Lost the bankruptcy headline. Lost. And every single loss became a line item on the largest personal comeback in the history of the culture. 9 shots did not silence Curtis Jackson. 9 shots gave Curtis Jackson a voice that sold 8 million records. That is not survival. That is alchemy. That is a man taking every knife the world stuck in Curtis Jackson's back and quietly, methodically, turning each knife into a key. The Queens kid nobody bet on became the man who owns a casino. And Sabrina, wherever Sabrina is watching from tonight, has to be smiling because Sabrina's son did not just get rich. Sabrina's son got even with everybody. And 50 Cent is not done. 50 Cent has never been done. The next chapter is already being filmed, and you are already in the audience whether you bought a ticket or not. And here is the last receipt, the one people forget to count. Curtis Jackson turned 50 years old. Still on tour, still cutting deals, still executive producing shows, still trolling every enemy quietly on Instagram at 3 a.m. like the ghost that never left. Half a century of breathing. A quarter century since the bullets. 2 decades since the platinum. And 50 Cent is still louder in the culture than most artists who never got shot at all. That is the whole thesis in one sentence. The bullets meant to end Curtis Jackson press print on the legend. 9 shots,